Hi guys, it's Blackie. Okay, today we're going to have a little story time because one of my followers had asked me, said, you know, in the past I had said I didn't care for SIL-NYLON, but now I'm running one wind products with SIL-NYLON tarps. What's the change? Okay, first let's talk about material. For a long time, hundreds of years, canvas, linen, and stuff like that was what was the material of choice for making packs, tarps, tents, things like that, shelters for militaries in the field. Cotton or linen is a very forgiving fabric because even with no water treatment, you can make a tarp out of it. And the water lands, it is absorbed by the tarp swells because of the water, and then it will trickle through the material and on the material to the bottom and out. Thus, if you poke it, you make a place where it start dripping. Okay, so they would waterproof it with all kinds of different methods. And then in the really, I'd say the early to mid 1900s, they started developing these man-made materials. Now, we call them a lot of different names. We call them nylon, we call them synthetic this, we call them whatever. But basically, it's where we start with a vat of some sort of chemistry. We run a chain or some sort of belt or conveyor through that liquid, and where it comes out, the viscousness of it sticks to it, and it's pulled and stretched like taffy, and that runs through a system and becomes a thread. And that thread is then woven into other materials. So it's actually, for lack of a better term, a plastic. It's a synthetic. That's not the true name of it, but you get my meaning. It's some sort of plastic-like material. Okay? It can be woven into cloth. It can be whatever. And this is very attractive in many ways for governments and things, with the idea of it doesn't rot. And that was always a problem with canvas. It would rot and it would mildew easily. Well, we don't have to worry about that here. You know, it's a synthetic. It doesn't whatever. Perhaps. But there are other downsides to it as well. Now let's talk about for a minute tarps. Okay? There are a lot of wonderful materials out there that are being used, and one of the big driving forces in the ultralight crowd is things like Cuban fiber and things like that. Super light, super thin, man-made plastics, basically, that are made in some sort of material. Now if you notice, the military doesn't use that. This is a military SIL-NY poncho. Very strong, relatively light, etc. And when they say SIL-NY, that's silicone on nylon. They've created a thin, strong material that is not by its nature waterproof. Then they spray onto it a silicone lining. Silicone is very flexible and therefore makes it waterproof, but it does wear off. It can be creased. In the extreme cold, you can start doing that and it will crack, things like that. There's a trade-off that has to be made here. And so things like Cuban fiber, they're a very tightly woven plastic that's kind of bonded and stuck together, and that is their strength and that is their weakness. Because in a lot of the ultralight crowd, they're always talking about lighter and lighter and lighter packs. I want this pack, I want that pack, super light, can I get it lighter, can I get it lighter? And I understand that mindset, but what you don't hear is durability. And here's why. When you create this man-made material, and let's say that I'm wanting to make an ultralight backpack out of said material, okay? Canvas and things like that, as we've talked about, they swell, they flex. This does not. And so, how do you connect it to itself to make straps or whatever? Well, if you melt it, which there's a fancy word of welding or bonding that they use, but if I basically melt it to itself, that also damages the structure, and the repeated flexing causes it to crack and eventually it breaks. I'll glue it. I'll put the two pieces together and I will glue it in that place. And that may flex a while and eventually it cracks or it breaks or it lets go. because since this is synthetic, it doesn't absorb it. It's on the surface. So it's like a peanut butter sandwich. It's bread, it's peanut butter, it's bread. It kind of sticks, but the only thing doing it is the friction between the two. Once that friction is lost, it loses its ability. And how many times have you been around nylon, things like that, where a strap has come off or something like that, and there'll be a big old patch of glue, and the strap came off. Okay, I'll glue it and I'll sew it. Okay, I'm not going to sew this with cotton thread. I'm going to sew it with another plastic man-made nylon material. And so when I sew it, what I'm actually doing is punching holes through it, and I am lacing it. Okay, now I have the bottom and I have the piece I'm putting on. Let's say I'm putting a strap connector. Okay, now as long as it's just laying there not being used, it's great. But I hang it up. When I hang it up, the two forces, because I want to pull my tarp tight, I want to pull against. This material doesn't give. This material doesn't give. That means that peanut butter, that glue, becomes the pull. And where the threads go, now the thread is the weak link. Now it's being pulled. Plus, and this is the problem with Cuban fiber, you can't keep a seam in them for terrible long. The edges where the needle punched through makes a sharp edge, and that sharp edge abrades the thread, which causes the stitching to go out of it. I'll re-sew it. If you don't hit the exact same holes again, all you're doing is weakening it. You see where the problem starts coming in. Durability. I have a couple of friends that they are big time into Ultralight. I mean, they want a 5-pound pack. And wonderful goal. But, and I won't mention any names here, but a friend of mine bought a $300 and some odd pack from one of the major manufacturers, and it was supposed to be the uber greatest best thing ever invented, and it weighed, I think, 2 ounces for this pack. Right. He used it for about 1.5 years before all the seams were giving up on it. If you tried to press and pack your gear into it, seams gave up. He tried being gentle with it, the straps started unraveling, you know, because as you're using it, as you're working it, as it's, you know, whatever, it's stressing, and those sharp edges of the material are sawing on the stitching, because the stitching is the weak link. If I melt them together, that causes it to be brittle. If I glue it together, the glue is the only thing holding it, and the glue will age. If I sew it together, the holes may be sharp and abrade the thing. We need to come up with a better way to bond this together. Okay? And that's the bottom line. If we could figure some way to make it be integrated, like a better term, woven back together, hey, it'd probably be a fantastic thing. But the number one problem with the SIL-NYLONs and with the plastics is longevity. Now, the military is right now using plastic packs, synthetic packs. But if you ever picked up one, you figure out it's not much lighter than canvas. Now they've taken that material and wove it in a pattern much like sailcloth, and they call it Honduran nylon and things like that. And it's how it's woven. It's woven like sailcloth. So the threads are backed onto each other, and they're kind of locked together, and if one individual thread gets broken, whoopee, because it's locked at every position, and it makes for a very durable pack. But you haven't saved much in weight. And see, therein lies the stickler. Can I make a synthetic bag as strong as, say, a canvas bag? Absolutely. Can I make a synthetic tarp much lighter than canvas? Absolutely. Can it be as waterproof as canvas? Absolutely. Will it have the longevity of canvas? Probably not. So you get to the, remember I love to use a pendulum? I want durability and long term. I have canvas tents. This is a 10 by 14 wall tent with a 4-foot sidewall. I got it in the early 90s. Used it literally hundreds of times. It was our primary rendezvousing going to big events. I used it at least 8 to 10, 12 times a year on those events where it's up a week. It's been through hurricane force storms. It's been through everything. And I can pull it out today and it's like it's brand new. I have nylon tarps that I spent big money for in the past that have done real well, but I've had to baby them. I don't put them up in severe weather. I try to avoid that because I want to try to get as much life out of it as I can. And what's holding it up is the fact that I realize that when that nylon tarp is in that storm and that storm's working, all those seams are sewing against each other. And I'm going to start losing stitching. If I get a hole in a nylon tarp, nylon is usually much thinner than canvas. And if I have a little stick fall down and poke it and make a little hole, and that's very common here in my part of the South. I mean, everywhere you look are these gnarly old oak limbs, and every one of them got these sharp little nubs on them. They hit your tarp with a pretty good bit of force because it's in the wind or whatever, and it can poke a little hole in it. Some of them, well, it doesn't leak, okay. Some of them, well, a little piece of duct tape. Some of them, duct tape won't stick to it. Some of the coatings that they put on, not even duct tape will stick to it for very long. It'll maybe one event, and as soon as you take it out, it's just going to roll off. You know, it just won't stick to whatever that is, and there's no way to really patch it except for some official patch kit. Very hard to carry in the field, to carry all this extra stuff to take care of the stuff that was supposed to be saving me weight. So, yes, I am at this present time using SIL-NYLON tarps made by One Wind, and I'm very happy with them. But you need to educate yourself onto what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses. Now let's talk about one of the things. Seams. If you buy, in my opinion, this is Blackie's 2 cents worth, take it for what you want. If I buy a SIL-NYLON tarp brand new from any company, I'm also going to get a bottle of seam sealer. And when I get it home, I'm going to inspect it, take a look at it, make sure there's no flaws, no missed threads or whatever, because that can happen. These things are produced high speed, and I've seen it where, like here, where you have a double seam running down. I've seen like missing a thread for like several inches there, where it broke when they were making it and the guy fixed it, but he didn't go back over it, you know, or the machine didn't do it, whatever. Checking those in so you can return it or whatever. After that, any place that has a seam, I'm going to roll over with seam sealer on both sides, even though it's brand new, because these are manufactured at a pretty good speed. And remember that tension? Well, the machine's got tension on it. When that tension relaxed, did it make a hole? Because unlike canvas, it don't swell none. The thread they use doesn't swell none. So a hole is a hole. And if that thread was over here against this when it was in the manufacturing process, and now that it's stretched and relaxed and it's over here and it's made a little fine gap that a little bit of water can seep in. The other piece of wisdom I'll impart to you is always use a tight ridge line separate from the tarp if you're using nylon. Run your ridge line across, pull it good and tight, put your nylon over it. Then use your tie outs to pull it with proof knocks onto that line. Do not pull the tension just on the nylon, because what are you doing? You're straining all your sewn edges. Plus, when you take it and you pull it, you're going to make grooves. It'll make, like, a lot of times you pull your two ends. See if I can pucker this up and get you. And I say, woo-hoo-hoo. You're going to pull it, and you see this little valley right there? You're going to generate a valley up there. And a valley is just a place for water to collect. If it's over a nice tight ridge line, draped over, pulled snug but not blood tight. Your corners are taken out and pulled snug but not blood tight. The water will sheet off. Don't give any place on that tarp for water to pool. Okay? This is extremely important in a SIL-NYLON, because If it's got a, I've seen guys that just take the ties on the end of the tarp and tie the tarp, and then there's a finger-like valley running the full length where the material pokes up like that, and you got a valley running down because this is the sides of that tie out that's been sewed, and that's your tension. You got a valley, and that fills up with water, and it'll find a place, and it'll leak. No pockets, no nothing on a nylon. You want it just as flat as you can get with the least tension as you can get to get the most life out of it. Overstressing a tarp, pulling it blood tight on every connection, man, it looks sharp and everything else. Sooner or later, those threads are going to let go because the material don't stretch. That sewed webbing don't stretch much. The only thing you got is the thread or the glue or both, and that's all you got holding it. Educate yourself and you get a lot of life out of it. You spend a lot of money for this tarp. Get as much life out of it as you can. Hope this gives you some ideas, guys. Please leave any questions or comments below. And thank you very much for supporting my channel. Till next time, I'm Blackie, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.